Depression is hard enough to navigate when you yourself are going through it, but even more so when you are married to someone who's experiencing depression. Depression can be really hard to navigate and to understand how it affects a marriage, especially when your marriage is already in crisis. That's what we are going to be covering on today's episode of Relationship Radio. What you are about to see is a recast of some of the original content, the OG content that we originally had on Relationship Radio back when we used to take live callers. This episode in particular, as we focus on depression, is such a goodie. It's such a treasure that we had to revive it and share it with you now because the information and the hope provided in it is timeless. Let's dive into today's episode.
Kimberly, I want to talk about one thing today, which more lends into your area of psychology, if we might. When we deal with people who are dealing with marriage difficulties, often we'll find that one, if not both of the spouses, would be depressed. I've actually got a definition here. I'm going to read it for the people. I got it from the American Psychiatric Association website. And just let me read this for a second. Let's talk about how it affects relationships, and particularly when there are marriage difficulties. So according to the American Psychiatric Association, depression is a major depressive disorder. That seems redundant somehow, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's the technical name for it, major depressive disorder.
That's exactly, you're right.
It'll be in the DSM
See,
that way.
Always value having here a psychologist.
I'm smart.
Okay. Well, actually, you are very smart. It's a common and serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and the way you act. Fortunately, it's also treatable. Now, depression causes feelings of sadness and or a loss of interest in activities once enjoyed. For example, it can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems and can decrease a person's ability to function at work. And so it can be things such as feeling sad or having a depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure in the things you used to enjoy doing, changes in appetite, either eating all the time or not eating at all, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, loss of energy, increased fatigue, increase in purposeless physical activity. In other words, walking around hand-wringing or pacing, nothing that's actually accomplishing anything, and slowed movements and speech, or sometimes just the opposite. People get hyper and they start talking a lot faster, feeling worthless or feeling guilty, difficulty thinking, concentrating or making decisions, and of course, in its more intense forms, thoughts of death or suicide. Now, I'm going to give you one more thing about that. There's a thing that you can find online called the PHQ-9. That stands for Public Health Questionnaire 9. It is not a diagnostic tool. It is a screening tool. And they ask 9 questions. I'm not going to go through all of them, but it's very similar to what I just read under the list, like having little interest or no pleasure in doing things, feeling down or hopeless, all those kinds of things we talked about. Now, if you can find the PHQ, it's going to ask you with each of these, have you experienced this one? Not at all, or have you experienced it for several days over the last 2 weeks, more than half of the days over the last 2 weeks, or nearly every day for the past 2 weeks? And then it'll actually give you a score. And from that score, it ranges all the way from none to mild to extreme. Well, as a matter of fact, they don't call it extreme. They call it...
Do they call it clinical?
Actually, not here because it's a screening tool rather than a diagnostic tool. A diagnostic tool, you're right, they would call it clinical. From minimal depression all the way to severe depression. Now, here's what we recommend, and we'll start explaining why. If you are depressed or struggling with any of the things that we've been talking about here, we suggest strongly that you go online and find the PHQ, Public Health Questionnaire 9. That means it has 9 questions. And that you answer them honestly about how you felt over the last 2 weeks. Then look at that score. And if the score indicates anything towards severe or extreme up in that range, anywhere up there, we strongly recommend that you go see your primary physician if you have one. Now, for some people, the primary physician is a gynecologist. But if your primary physician, and you take that, print it out, take it to them, show them the score that you have and how you scored each one. Now, he or she probably will prescribe some kind of antidepressant. They may recommend that you go see a counselor or therapist. And if they do, often they will have one to which they will recommend you, someone that they have confidence in. And why should you do that? Why not just bull your way through it, somehow make it? What do you think that depression does if we have one spouse? And we'll make it a wife, in the sense that we know that statistically speaking, women do suffer from depression more than men do. Now, men do as well, so don't think it's a gender thing, but women do statistically suffer more. And so say there's some kind of a marriage difficulty going on, and that she's in depression. Now, maybe her depression has resulted because of the fact that he's been involved with somebody else. And we can see how that would lead to depression. Sure. Maybe the depression is because of some kind of biochemical disorder, meaning that you're not balanced out, that maybe you're taking the wrong kinds of medicines, or this is a side effect of a medicine, or that you're not eating like you should, which can also cause all these things.
Sure.
How does that negatively affect them trying to do things for their relationship?
Well, it affects, I want to say everything about it. It definitely affects a lot, because when you have one person who is not thinking right, and it's not because they've done something wrong, but it's just the way that their mind is currently thinking, there's an imbalance, right? There's an imbalance of certain chemicals in your brain. You can't will yourself out of depression.
Right.
You might be able to will yourself out of difficult days, but this isn't a difficult day. Depression is actually something that needs some type of intervention. And while some people are able to have coping mechanisms and get out of depression without taking medicine, if you look at the research of what is the most effective, it's actually a combination between antidepressants, cognitive behavioral therapy, and physical exercise. Those three things together have the highest efficacy rate in helping a person get past and through depression. But when you're in that place, when just the symptoms that you read, you've lost pleasure in things that you used to love. You've become, to your spouse, a different person.
That's right.
And when they feel like they have no idea how to please you, how to make you happy, they feel like they're hitting their head against the wall and they don't know what to do. They're more likely to retreat after a point because they don't want to be sad. When they're around you, they're sad. They don't know what they can do to make you happy.
So they tend to move away from you.
So they tend to end up moving away. And it's not because they don't care,
but
they don't know what to do.
What if it's somebody like in the case we just started with, maybe he is having an affair and he wants to be with the other woman. If his wife goes into depression, she actually decreases the likelihood that she'll do the things that can help put that marriage back together for the very same things you're saying. Because it's just like, wow, here's the woman in this particular guy's case, and we're not justifying him. We're not saying that he's right. We're just trying to understand how people think. Here's the woman that makes me happy, and I'm happy to be with her. And here's the woman that when I'm around her is sad, or she's eating like a horse because of the depression, or she stopped eating altogether, and I'm worried about her health. And all those other things. We talk about pies, the physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, to help you become the most attractive person you can be. And you do that for you, not just to get the other person back. But if you're not dealing with your depression, not getting the help, then it becomes easier for the other person to move away from you.
It does.
So for your own sake, get help for the depression. You don't want to feel like this. You don't want to live like this. So go get the help that you need so that you can deal with life again. Now, you said three things. You said medicine?
The antidepressants, SSRIs, cognitive behavioral therapy is the most effective for depression, and physical exercise. Combining all three of those is the best. But even just combining two of those, pick the two you want, is still more effective than any one of those on its own.
Right.
All of those things, because you're looking to get your chemicals in your brain back. And so doing the things like in the physical exercise, it's releasing certain chemicals into your body that are going to help you to feel better.
That is correct.
Help you to think a little bit clearer. The medicine is going to add on top of that. And the cognitive behavioral therapy is to get you thinking right. Because when you're going through depression, and it's something that in my past I've had bouts of struggling with, and when you're in it, you really aren't thinking right. It's very difficult to see things clearly, to see things non-emotionally. And so when you add on top of that, if there's a spouse who's wanting out of the marriage, then you're already hurt by that. Piled on top of the depression, the motivation to do the things that you need to do, the ability to see hope at the other end of this circumstance, it would be almost impossible.
Now, there is one other relatively new methodology for dealing with depression. It has to do with magnets. Now, I haven't looked up the name of it. I used to know it, and I've now gone totally blank on it. One of our psychiatrist friends in Huntsville, a very close friend of ours, Dr. Charles Hayden, uses it in his practice. And if you look for magnetic therapy for depression, it's relatively expensive, it's relatively new, and it has a tremendous success record. But you probably have to have a little bit of money if you're going to do that one.
Probably so.
Whereas for the SSRIs, that's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, antidepressant medicine your doctor would give you, and the therapist and the exercise would be much more, well, insurance will help pay for a lot of that.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure if insurance pays for the magnetic things or not.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I haven't tried it.
Well, I know that Dr. Hayden tells us he's having an amazing success, not just with people in a particular bout, but actually curing the depression, which is relatively unique. The point here is this. Do what you need to do to deal with this, because if you stay in the depressed mood, you can have those wonderful pity parties. Oh, woe is me. A pity party is the kind of party you don't invite anybody to come to because it might cheer you up. It's one of those things where it hurts so bad and feels so good. But please, please do what you need to do there.